This is Solidarity News Brief, bringing you news highlighting the dignity of human life from conception to natural death. We have a special program for you today. The bill signed into law last year, called the Big Beautiful Bill, or OBBBA, by its proponents, has been in effect for over 1 year. According to a CBS News article, which is the only mainstream media outlet which followed up a published analysis 1 year after the signing, from July 9th, 2025, White House spokesman Kash Patel said President Trump's working families tax cut is simultaneously delivering short-term economic relief while laying the groundwork for long-term economic growth. But opponents and skeptics have signaled that this bill benefits the wealthiest in its tax policy at the expense of the poorest by cuts in food stamp programs and Medi-Cal restrictions, all while increasing the federal deficit. Let's dig deep into this from a whole life perspective. To help us understand this, we have three former candidates for the American Solidarity Party, or ASP. Brian Carroll was the 2020 presidential candidate for the ASP. James Hanink was the candidate for California for governor of the ASP in the recall election of 2021 and the primary election of 2022. Mark Ruzon is the chair of the ASP California State Committee and was the U.S. Senate candidate for the ASP in 2024. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Dominick.
Thank you for being here. This bill the bill seems to have maintained tax savings for middle-class taxpayers, but according to the CBS article, quote, higher income households benefited because the law permanently preserved the top individual tax rate at 37%, rather than allowing it to revert to the 39.6% that mostly affects the top 2% of U.S. taxpayers, or individuals earning over $640,000 and married couples with at least $768,000 in annual income. Close quote. So according to the CBS News article, the OBBBA also benefited high-income households by increasing the state and local tax deduction, which the law raised from $10,000 to $40,000 a year. For corporations, investments on equipment can be written off fully, as opposed to this write-off which had been decreased under the previous law. And the law also made domestic research and development cases expenses immediately deductible. Whitten of ITEP said, for example, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, and Tesla together took home an astonishing $51 billion in tax breaks in 2025, much of it from the new law. So, gentlemen, what are your thoughts on this, especially the tax breaks for the very rich that were present in this bill? Do you have any thoughts on those numbers? We'll start with you, Brian.
Yeah, lowering taxes by itself is not the belt tightening that we need. When we have a deficit of $40 trillion, which is twice what it was when Trump in 2016 said he would cut it in half, we're not making progress. We're going backwards. I don't mind paying taxes when I feel like it's going towards the common good. But under the current administration, when we are arresting people at work sites, people who are paying taxes, they're a lot of times their status is actually legal until the administration cancels the programs that made them legal. But they're paying taxes. They're our good neighbors. And when our money is going towards that instead of the food stamps, the child nutrition, the medical care, the things that make our society healthier, that's when I object to paying taxes.
No, absolutely. Jim, what about you?
Yes, the big and mostly bad bill. It does allow for one interesting tax break. There's no longer a tax on firearm silencers. Very interesting indeed. Structurally, though, and Brian is exactly right, we have a regressive tax structure in the big bad bill, and what we need is a progressive structure. I'm thinking of Aristotle. Equals should be treated equally, and unequals unequally in proportion to the relevant difference. And the relevant difference here in contribution to the common good is that the very wealthy could make a very large financial contribution. But instead of doing that, they're enabled to become even wealthier. So we move away from what could be an economic democracy and more towards an economic aristocracy.
Thanks, Jim. Mark?
So we have taken the Trump tax cuts, which benefited the wealthy when they were enacted in 2017. It was an act that was so heinous that when the 2018 midterms came around, the Republicans didn't even campaign on the one thing that they actually did with their time in Congress that year, because it was so bad. And now they've made them permanent. And where's the money coming from to pay for these? Brian alluded to the borrowing that we're doing, and the borrowing is bad. We now owe more than our entire country makes in a single year, and there's no end to this in sight. And it's based on a flawed economic model. The idea being that we should run, when times are bad, we should run deficits to goose the economy and keep things flowing. And then when times are good, we should run surpluses and then use that money to pay off the debt. Except we do the first part and we never ever do the second. So Democrats at least raise taxes and then raise spending. And then Republicans tend to just cut taxes and then not cut spending. Spending grows under all administrations. And so we're pushing ourselves off of a cliff really fast. We may see Japan go over that cliff first. They're a lot higher than we are in terms of debt to GDP ratio. But we're basically funding these tax cuts with our grandchildren's future. And right now, the young generation coming up is the most anxious and depressed generation of Americans that we've ever produced. And while there's a number of reasons for that, a big one is that they see that there's no economic hope for them. They're not going to get good jobs. They're not going to be able to have an economy that's functioning for them because it's only functioning for a few wealthy people. So I would give these tax cuts a giant F.
Yeah, it certainly does seem that way. One thing that's interesting, there are some sort of nods at some interesting ideas in the bill, and just a couple of things I wanted to get your guys' input on. The no tax on tips, quote, and quote, no tax on overtime provisions seem to help workers in some situations. In the CBS News article, it said about 7 million workers claimed the no tax on tips deduction, while 28 million people claimed the overtime deduction. The House Ways and Means Committee said in May. The typical deduction in the most recent tax year was $7,000 for tips, $3,100 for overtime. In addition, the so-called Trump account has $1,000 investments in an account for eligible newborns. And more than 6 million people have opened those accounts. Now, I'm curious whether you guys agree with those particular kind of policy ideas, or if you have other ideas that would be more geared towards the principles of distributism espoused by the American Solidarity Party. Mark, we'll start with you this time.
Thanks, Dominic. So what I see here is a giant bait and switch. We are giving tax cuts that are very small to a few people who may make a few $1,000s, maybe $8,000 or $10,000. But then we're cutting health insurance for lots of people, which is running, the premiums for a family of four are now running ahead of $10,000 a month. So there's absolutely no benefit except for possibly a few certain families there. But overall, the effect is hugely negative. And you mentioned distributism, Dominic, and I'm glad you did, because in a distributist economy, we actually wouldn't be taxing incomes at all. We've been taxing income so long in this country that it seems second nature that the government should just pick something out of your paycheck and send it to some guy named FICA. But the truth is that when you tax something, you wind up getting less of it. Do we want less labor in our society? No. Work is an intrinsic value of part of the dignity of the human being. It's what gets people up in the morning, even if they weren't working at a paying job. They're always doing something, tinkering or whatever. So we have a very basic human need to work, and having income taxes simply takes that away. It lowers the incentive for people to work. So, under a distributed system, we would be taxing land and not labor or capital, since capital is just labor that you did at some point in the past and you stored it instead of spending it as soon as you got your paycheck. So if we were to do that and we were to acknowledge that we have a certain finite limit on our resources, and instead of saying, well, let's raise taxes this year, cut them next year, let's raise spending, cut spending, only the net effect, as I said before, is always towards greater and greater debt. If we just said, this is what our actual natural resources are, the land that we live on, and that's what we taxed, then we would find ourselves in a much stronger situation. And that's what distributism promises.
Thanks, Mark. Jim?
It's contagious, the debt. If we were to add individual debt to the national debt, we'd go up to $77 trillion of debt. Now, there are various reasons why individuals are in debt, but the whole structure, as Mark pointed out, is putting us on a precipice. In fact, the bill, the big and mostly bad bill, raised the cap $5 trillion on the national debt, so we could spend even more. And when you look at particulars, well, there is a particular statistic here on defense, which, well, if we have a Department of Defense, I guess it's not money spent on defense, it's Department of War, isn't it? Yes, it's the Department of War, so this is money spent on war. We have in the bill $150 billion for, I'll be neutral, the military, $150 billion. And of that figure, well, we have $15 billion designated for the nuclear stockpile. So $15 billion in order to make the nuclear weapons even more terrible than they already are. There's a kind of, and I think Mark was suggesting as much, there's a kind of lunacy abroad. We're really dealing with a kind of lunacy.
No, absolutely. Brian, you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'll let others speak to the tips and overtime. As a school teacher, I never got paid for overtime, and I never got to collect tips. But it's gimmickry. Most of the tips go to minimum wage workers who are paying very low amounts of tax to start with. So it's a flashy headline, but it doesn't really help that many people. And it will really not help people when other parts of the same bill, for example, in my county, we are heavily agricultural, and we get major money coming into this county through SNAP and Medicare and Social Security. And we may, if people save a few bucks on taxes on tips, but our hospital goes bankrupt, none of us are helped. And that's a very real threat. We're going to have an epidemic of closing hospitals. And then what good is the little bit that you saved on your tax on tips?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. One other point, I mean, this one I think is maybe more obviously one of the big negatives, but I just want to cover it. The 1-year federal prohibition on Medicaid reimbursements to Planned Parenthood, which had been enacted via the 2025 bill, expired in early July 2026. As we know, Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of abortions, a procedure which kills an unborn human being. According to a political article from January 2026, the American Civil Liberties Union dropped its lawsuit against the Trump administration over tens of millions in Title X family planning funds that federal officials had withheld from Planned Parenthood and some other health clinics since last spring, after the HHS quietly released the money in December 2025. What are your thoughts on this reversion, on this action of the current administration in Trump's second term, and what would you do differently? Brian, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, for the Democratic Party, Planned Parenthood is their most favored constituent, and they're very public about it. The Republican Party is just as generous to Planned Parenthood, but they keep it secret, or they try and hide it. I was not elected president in 2020, but one of the things I would have done is everything I could have possibly accomplished against whatever forces they could throw at it, but to get the money out of Planned Parenthood.
Absolutely. Jim?
I'm interested in the fact that when the Republican negotiators for the bill temporarily moved money away from Planned Parenthood, it wasn't on the basis of the intrinsic dignity of human life. It wasn't based on that at all. It was charged against Planned Parenthood that they were being overly woke with regard to diversity. That was the problem. That was the reason. We're going to take this money away from you because we think that you are actually favoring African Americans. That was the argument. And that argument is bogus. And the real reason for defunding Planned Parenthood wasn't mentioned. It was just glossed over.
Absolutely. Mark?
So the actual release of funds just meant that the president for once was actually forced to follow the law. He has done so many things that have just flown in the face of every norm that presidents have followed for decades. And he pushes in all directions, and then when somebody pushes back, then he just kind of sweeps it under the rug and just keeps pushing elsewhere. So in this case, if Congress let the provision in the bill expire at the end of 2025, and so the president is really there to enforce the laws that are passed by Congress. And since this Congress passed a bill that said you have to spend this money in this place, the president really has no right to say, no, I won't. He can obviously make a stand on it, which he did, but it's just for scoring cheap political points. It's not actually saving anybody. So the question is, why did Donald Trump, who's been able to keep the entire congressional Republican constituency as lapdogs since he got inaugurated the second time, why wasn't he able to push this provision and keep it from expiring? And it's because he apparently didn't think it was important enough. Once the Dobbs decision went in and abortion became an issue to be settled correctly, in my opinion, at the state level, then suddenly the matter was no longer important to him. He had all those people in his pocket, and he was not going to do anything more about it. And that's sad, because when we have a society that is not committed to the dignity of everybody, then really anybody's rights can be taken away. We're seeing that in immigration. We're seeing that in race relations. We're seeing that in many different ways. And it all stems from a refusal to acknowledge that human beings are intrinsically valuable.
Another area we saw the bill address was different restricting different benefits programs in different ways and kind of curtailing them in different ways. As mentioned in the article from CBS News, it imposed new work requirements on able-bodied adults aged 18 to 64. Previously, it had been only applied to adults up to age 55. Other groups that were previously exempt also have to now meet the work requirement: former foster youth, veterans, homeless, people experiencing homelessness. Since the OBBBA was signed into law, SNAP participation has dropped by more than 4 million people, which is about 10%, through March. That's according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And separately, Medicaid employees will face new work requirements and more frequent eligibility checks beginning in 2027. Those changes are expected to reduce Medicaid enrollment by between 5 and 10 million people. Any thoughts on those benefit reductions there, Mark?
Yes, and in a word, they're bad. Cutting health insurance is not the way to produce a healthy workforce or a healthy society. We should be moving towards trying to get more people onto health insurance. That was the one thing that Obamacare, for all of its flaws, did manage to do. It cut the uninsured rate in this country in half. And children are also much more likely to suffer from not having health insurance, and they're the ones who need it most because those are our future workers. And so there's also an indignity in the actual, not in the requirements themselves, but in the bureaucracy that they create. So every time a poor person in this country has to fill out a form to receive some benefit, the form is constructed basically as a way to weed people out in the name of fraud. I don't deny that fraud exists, but fraud is not the key mover here. What's causing the problem is that every time you have to fill out a form, and these forms have to be filled out regularly, not just once and then you're done, it becomes a tax on your time. Bureaucrats can find things that are wrong with it and use it to use clerical errors as a way of denying you benefits. And it basically sends a message to poor people that we don't trust you, we don't like you, we want you to go away, and we're going to put up as many obstacles in your path as we can think of in order to get you to stop trying to get the benefits that we are proclaiming that are available to everybody. A truly solidarist approach would be one where we just do more or less, what Social Security has done, and just kind of give the money to everybody who's eligible, that is. So if you're eligible, then you get the benefit, and if you're not eligible, you don't get the benefit. And forcing people to fill out forms, every 3 or 6 months, just denies their humanity.
Thanks, Mark. Jim?
Two particulars come to mind here. I support and endorse Mark's comments entirely, but two particulars to add. In my neighborhood, there's a place in a mall, a big mall, that's wholly dedicated to helping people fill out the sorts of forms that Mark was speaking of. That's its whole function. There are lots and lots of government forms, and here's a place that offers help simply in filling out forms. And I certainly appreciate the need for it, but it's an index, a visible index of the nasty kind of procedures that are in place. The other particular is this. In Arizona, and the governance of Arizona has its own explanation, but in Arizona, since the big mostly bad bill was passed, SNAP enrollment has gone down by 50%. 50%. And in 6 months, the 50% of the people, the percentage of the people who are still getting the other 50% will have to refile again because it's every 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, compared to some of the things we were talking about earlier, I mean, these are not insignificant figures. Thank you, Jim. Brian.
Before I retired, the school I was teaching at, 95% of the students qualified for free lunches under SNAP, and so they gave it to everybody. And that's more efficient. You know, if you have to hire somebody to sit there and read those forms because, 5% of the people may not qualify and those 5% may be close to qualifying, that's terribly inefficient. And our healthcare system is equally inefficient. The healthcare system we have is designed primarily to provide profits to the insurance companies. We spend more of our GNP on medical care than any other industrial country. And we have fewer results. We have more people who are not covered at all. The better way to do it is to work the private companies out of the insurance thing and give insurance to everybody, give medical insurance to everybody. I have a son and daughter-in-law who are living in England. All three of their children were born under the British system. And that works so well compared to our system. I have a couple grandkids that were born in Brazil, and their system is better than ours. We have to get away from the for-profit insurance companies controlling our healthcare. We need to be able to provide healthcare to people, poor people, so they don't have to show up at the emergency room. Poor people who don't have insurance are forced to go to the emergency room because they can't pay for ordinary care. That's incredibly inefficient. And the only way we are ever going to have good medical insurance in this company is to get the for-profit companies out of the insurance.
Thank you, Brian. One of our last topics I wanted to make sure we hit on tonight was the bill's effect on the environment in various different ways. According to the CBS News article from July 2026, the OBBBA ended federal tax incentives for electric vehicles last year and also sunset some clean energy credits, such as rooftop solar home efficiency credits. The law also accelerated the phase-outs for some corporate tax credits for clean energy investments, such as solar and wind energy, according to the firm RSM. EV sales have fallen sharply since the OBBBA ended the tax credits for the vehicles, which sales down 22% so far in 2026 compared with a year earlier, according to Cox Automotive. Brian, do you have thoughts on any of these effects or anything you would do differently?
The carbon-based energy industry is a major recipient of government support. You know, we have been pumping money as a country, pumping money into keeping the price low by supporting the companies. And if you look at what's happened in the months that we've been at war with Iran, the energy companies are making windfall profits, just enormous profits, horrible stuff. And at the same time, the president has canceled like some wind projects. They were already built. They were ready to go to work, and we paid for them. And so then he turns around and pays to have them removed. That's crazy. We need all of the different forms of energy that we can produce, and we should be encouraging them, not punishing them for doing a job.
Jim?
I just hope and pray that the terrible weather that the country's experiencing, and of course Europe as well, I just hope that people will be able to connect the dots. There's this expression, handwriting on the wall. Well, this is kind of the atmosphere on the wall. The terrible changes in the weather are affecting all sorts of people that never thought that they would be affected, but they are being affected. And the idea that somehow we're not contributing to this is once again a crazy sort of position to uphold. But here we have the president doing exactly that.
Mark?
So the president would like to believe that climate change is a hoax and that we're just having a unlucky streak or something. I don't know what he thinks, but the climate is getting worse, and we're going to see more droughts and more floods, paradoxically, at the same time. And oil and gas are simply not going to get us to where we want to go. It's interesting to note that as these oil and gas companies, as Brian mentioned, have achieved their windfall profits, the Trump family is also receiving windfall profits. And with the price of gas going up, Americans are finding that their paychecks are just not stretching as far as they used to. And so the price of gas may actually do exactly what the president is hoping will not happen, and that is drive more EV sales. But by taking our foot off the accelerator, we've changed our automobile industry, which was moving strongly in the direction of creating lots of electric vehicles, to one that's retreated. The Ford F-150 electric version has been canceled. There are other electric cars made by the big three that are no longer going to be produced. And as a result, we've pretty much ceded the entire electric vehicle market and the supply chain that creates electric vehicles to China. China is now exporting millions of electric vehicles all over the world. And soon we could find ourselves in a place where our own car companies are not able to export cars to other nations because they're going to be internal combustion engine cars, and other countries simply aren't going to want them. They're going to want to buy electric cars. And so this could actually wind up boomeranging and damaging our own automobile industry. And after all the work that we did to save it through these past few decades, it was on track, and now it's gotten off track. And these ending tax credits are simply forcing it to be further off track. And it's going to wind up being bad for the environment, it's going to be bad for the economy, and it's going to be bad for the American people. Other than that, it's just fine.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I thank you to all three of you. I've greatly enjoyed everything you said. I've learned a lot tonight, and I appreciate all that you guys have to offer on reflection on this bill a year after the fact. I just wanted to give you all an opportunity to, if you wanted to add anything else, other effects you think that the bill has had, or the Trump administration in general, that you wanted to comment on. Mark, did you have any further kind of closing comments?
I could just let out a primal scream, but I don't want to really upset any of our older listeners who might be on the call. So I will simply say that this administration has been a complete dumpster fire and is really not taking us where we need to go as a nation. Instead, what we need to do is we need to focus on moving power away from the federal government and towards state and local governments, where people are closer to those who are in power and can affect decisions better than they can in Washington. Until we do that, we will simply wind up in a situation where Trump or any other madman who takes control of the presidency can drive our economy and our society into the ground with little chance of recuperating from that in the near future.
Jim. Any other thoughts on the OBBBA or otherwise?
I had an ad block ad pop up. I'm sorry, but it's it's significant that there be such a thing as that. Here are a couple thoughts. Thought number one: the bill was almost 1,000 pages long, which means that very, 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 very few people read it through, which means that it was fed out to a great many people to be vetted insofar it was vetted at all. Now, I think we should reflect on why it is that this kind of legislation gets put together at all. Why not some focused bills that are coherent? But for the longest time, bills have been piggybacked one on the other, and you get to a kind of a reductio ad absurdum with this bill, 1,000 pages long, almost. Surely democracy can work better than that. The other thing is that it's very easy with a bill like this to lose track of particulars. Now, we've talked about the miserable immigration policies of this government, but the ICE budget, here's a particular, went from 10 billion to 100 billion. 10 billion to 100 billion dollars for ICE. And one of their newest items, gloves, electric gloves. The ICE people don't feel the electricity, but whoever the gloves touch feel the electricity. This is a particular. When you have $100 billion, you can get all sorts of really appalling devices like that. And here's the very last thought that I would offer. I just saw this in the NY Times today, but I've been working with a fellow reviewing his manuscript, and the title of the manuscript working title is Christian Theory of Justice. The kinds of justice theories we've had in contemporary philosophy have been very, very narrow, very, very narrow. And this fellow, Daniel Philpott, who teaches at the University of Notre Dame, wants to compare the narrow focus of contemporary thought on justice theory with the scriptural understanding of justice. And the scriptural understanding of justice fundamentally includes mercy, fundamentally includes forgiveness. Now, given that background, one thing that people in the party can do, and people who are committed Christians can do, can mention the biblical notion of forgiveness of debts. The debt structure we have now is so impossible that there really needs to be, even if Christians are the only ones to talk about it, a kind of resetting of things by major experiments in debt forgiveness. For a long time, people have talked about this for third world countries, but we need to start to talk about it for ourselves, at least in certain sectors of the economy.
Thanks, Jim. Brian, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'll pick up on what Mark said about China, because the big winner of the war with Iran has been China. They just sit and watch us destroy ourselves, and then they pick up and they gain, all the countries that we have offended, all of our close friends, Canada, Europe, Brazil, that we are now putting tariffs on. They say, okay, we don't need the United States anymore. We'll just go deal with China. And so Trump has been very successful in making China great again. And he has taken our allies, especially in Europe, and dismembered NATO. He's just destroyed NATO. There's no trust there anymore. And that helps make Russia great again. And Iran is going to be come out of this war when it's finally over, Iran is going to be in control of the Strait of Hormuz and able to charge fees on every boat that goes through. So we're making Iran great again. We're even making North Korea great again. Trump has taken the side of North Korea against South Korea. That's a longtime ally of ours, and it also affects our relationship with Japan. So our priorities are not just misplaced, they're reversed. And we have to, I'm not real fond of some of the Democrats, but right now we have got to flip the House and the Senate and be able to stop Trump in all of his behavior.
Thank you, gentlemen. A wonderful conversation. I mean, not necessarily the latest material, but wide-ranging, eloquent, wise as always. So thank you for your input.
Thank you, Dominick.
Thank you.
And, yeah, absolutely. You all should consider running for office sometime.
Did that.
Yeah,
that.
Been there.
Wonderful. And to our audience, good night. And remember, all human life has dignity from conception to natural death.